want to thank our sponsors.
JustForPolice.com, a grassroots service reward program established for police officers buying and selling real estate. Jiu-Jitsu50.com, a lifestyle brand training resource for law enforcement officers, providing technique videos, blog articles, promoted courses, and the latest in apparel and gear. Jiu-Jitsu50.com. Storm Training and Consulting, offering courses in firearms, tactical emergency medicine, and the Tactical Rescue Challenge. Stormtraining.org. Manchester Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, aka Bushido, located in Manchester, Connecticut, a staple in the jiu-jitsu community for over 20 years. ManchesterBJJ.com.
How's it going? Welcome back to The Code. We got episode number 21, going into our second year.
21 for 21.
Yeah, there you go.
There we go.
Sounds great. So you had a great holiday season. I know I did. Get anything cool for Christmas?
Nothing. You know what? My wife got me, and you're going to love this, cornhole. Not only cornhole, but they're the Captain America shields.
Oh, yeah, I like that already.
And it's like she went out, she got them, and it's like she got them specially done. They're the legit size because everywhere else you go, I think it's like a 3x4. They're 4x5. They're huge. Wow. They're amazing. So I'm excited to finally get through this winter. I know it's only January, and it's Connecticut. But spring comes and I'm trading in my jiu-jitsu belt for a cornhole.
Oh, wow, that sounds interesting. Well, I don't mean to cut you off, but I got a better gift.
Yes.
So I got this book. I'll hold it up for our viewers that watch on YouTube. Worth Defending, with what Rob Kahn refers to as our friend Rob. He refers to the guy who wrote this book, Richard Bressler, as patient zero in Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. Basically, the first guy that was infected with doing jiu-jitsu is how he describes it. So we have a present to our viewers and our listeners because we have Richard on the show with us today. Richard, how are you?
I'm great, thank you. How about yourself?
Doing awesome. So tell us, how did you even start to think of, like, how long have you been thinking of writing a book, and how did that process all begin, and what was it like?
I started doing podcasts probably about 10 years ago. And every time I would do a podcast, the guys they'd always allude to, hey, maybe you should write a book. And I went, yeah. But, because I just kind of, it's something that I thought about doing. But one of the things that I alluded to in the book was that I was not a good student of things that I wasn't interested in. And that's what started the whole thing about me thinking that I was not smart enough. So I went like, even after I'd gotten past this, I went like, oh God, writing a book. Oh, geez, that's like, I thought about doing it and I'd sit down and I'd go like, no, not going to happen.
Yep.
So I'd go on another podcast. People, hey, you should write a book. People would say, when I teach a class, because of the background that I have in jiu-jitsu and having all the guys that I've been fortunate enough to be taught by, as I would start to say this move, and I go, by the way, Rorion Gracie showed me this move, and it was at the Academy, it was in, and then, 90s. And then I said, and this reminds me of the first time that, I rolled with him, which is back in 1980, so as I started, I became a storyteller when I would teach a class. So people would say, hey, what about writing a book? So, and then finally there was a friend of mine, a former student who's now a black belt. His name is Chris Gores. And he said, Richard, you should really write a book. And I went, yeah, you're not the first one who told me. And he goes, and we're on the phone and he goes, no, you should really write a book. And I was like, whoa, and I went, and then I started talking to one of my students at the time. And she goes, I'm a writer. And this other student said, I do social media. And we started doing something. And I got together with a guy in Detroit. and we started putting things down, audios. He just said, let's record it, so we started doing that. And, I appreciate what he was doing, but it wasn't a good match for either one of us. And then this other woman helped me, and she kind of started the thing. And then I put something on Facebook, and Scott answered. And from the moment we started talking, Scott's a black belt, under Steve Maxwell. So we started talking, and we had like a series of, probably at least a dozen interviews. Plus, he had listened to and read everything that was out there about me. So
he had done his research. And you're referring to Scott Burr for our listeners.
Scott Burr, yeah.
Correct. Now, what most people that are watching or listening, that they've all heard of and know what Gracie Jiu-Jitsu is now, and it's somewhat become a household name over the years. But if you go way back in time, back to the late 70s and early 80s, no one knew what it was. Right. Very, 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 very few people knew what it was. And I didn't start to understand what it was at all until probably the late 80s, early 90s, whatever the advertisements would come out for Gracie in Action in the Black Belt magazine and stuff. So I don't know what year that would have been, but probably early 90s, maybe.
The In Action videos?
Yeah, they would do advertisements in Black Belt magazine for Gracie in Action. And
the In Action videos were probably mid 80s, probably mid to late, because I remember either 86 or 87, and I'm not exactly sure, because we got the house on 3rd Street. I moved out after a year. He stayed there for probably another 6 years. And then when he moved out to another location in Torrance, because we had filmed a lot of the things, the demos that we did around here, at El Camino College and any other place we were at, we always took the video camera, and, quite a few of those things, I was shooting, or I was at least there, or I was shooting the footage. And so the In Action one, I remember, because I was also the guy that went to the post office with 8 or 10 at a time and mail them out. So it was probably 87 or something like that.
So I guess the point of my whole thing there was you were one of the very, very first people to be exposed to this. And it all started over a waterbed, correct?
Yeah, it all started over a waterbed.
So you want to explain to our audience, how did you get involved in jiu-jitsu? How did this whole thing, because I thought it was like meant to be, the way that I read it.
I hope I can say it the way that you understood it. So you go like, what? But the book doesn't. Anyways, I was really not in a good place at all. I mean, I was doing a business that I didn't like to do. My days were doing Quaaludes and cocaine. I mean, working throughout the day. I'd start my day off with a bong, and I get a little bit tired, and then the book, because I've seen what people have written about, like being an addict. An addict is such an interesting word. It's almost like one of those marketing words that makes well, this is better for sales or whatever. Whether you call me an addict or not, because I guess when I hear the word addict, I think, oh, the guy's down and out, he's on the street. I was a very functional, to a point, doing a business I didn't like, being high throughout the whole day, just enough to balance me. Quaaludes, cocaine, pot. I'd get a little low, I'd do a little snort, and I'd get a little up, and then I'd start to get too much. So it was, anyways, to make a long story short, I had a friend in the waterbed business, and I had bought a mattress from him. And then after I got it, I went, oh crap, I don't have a frame. So I called him up. I said, hey, I need a frame. He says, well, why don't you just buy the whole set? So I said, okay, let's buy the whole set. The set came with another mattress. And I said, look, can you just deduct? And he goes, no, we can't do that. So I said, okay, fine, I'll sell it. So I put it in the recycler. And
which is like a magazine or something, or a newspaper?
Okay. The recycler is it's kind of like Craigslist, but yeah, like a little wanted ads newspaper. Mm-hmm. That's how we sold things back in the day.
This is 1979, correct?
1979.
Yep.
Probably June of 1979. So Rorion's roommate leaves a message on my machine. I got home, called Rorion, or called the number. Rorion answered the phone. He goes, I said, you called about a waterbed? And he goes, no. He said, yeah, well, yeah. He said, but that was my roommate, but he already got one. So I was ready to hang up, and he said, but I'm looking for one. So I told him where I lived, and he came over. I mean, he came over probably within an hour. He lived in the South Bay. I lived in the Marina, which is, back then it was 20 minutes. Now it's about 20 minutes, but when things get back to normal with traffic, who knows? Anyways, he came over. This guy really very calm guy comes in, and so we start talking. I make him a great deal on those sheets. And, he said the same thing. If you know Rorion, right? So you know that one of the things that he used to say is, I'm from Brazil, I don't speak English. But he spoke really great English. But anyway, so he said, how much do you want per a set of sheets? And I said, $15, king size in the package. And he goes, Richard, I'm from Brazil, I don't speak English, I don't have a lot of money. He says, why don't you give me all 3 sets for 15? And I'm like, seriously? I'm giving you a great deal. And he goes, you never know when it'll come back to you. I'm like, oh, God. And he was a nice guy, very calm, very charming. So I went, okay, fine. So, I got the whole thing, 3 sets of sheets and a water in the box, for, $40.
Wow.
So as we were walking out, he asked me, have you ever done any martial arts? And I said, yeah, I'd boxed for, 3 months, 4 months, because a guy doesn't want to sound like he doesn't know how to defend himself. And so I said, why? And he says, my family's been doing jiu-jitsu in Brazil for 60 years or whatever. And we're champions or very well known. And I'm like, yeah, sure you are, buddy. I mean, seriously. And, but he said, my friend, why don't you come by for a free class?
That's the word, my friend. They all say
yeah, that's it. And as soon as he said like free class, I went like, what do I have to lose? Except I thought about right away. I was like, yeah, I'll do it. And then when I was going there, I went, the paranoia part of me went like, oh my God, man. I had visions of guys, like, hiya, and screaming and going, oh my God, am I going to get punched? Or, you have no idea, because who knew about jiu-jitsu? I mean,
but that's quite a jump though for you to take, to sit there and say, you know what, I am gonna go to this guy's house, who knows where, doing who knows what, so
who knows how much the history would have changed had you said no.
Yeah.
I mean, think about that with the Gracie Academy, the UFC, who knows if it all would have even happened if you weren't that domino in between the other two that kept it going. I mean, I don't know. It's a good question.
Something told me just to go do this. It was just something that, maybe it was his charming way about, the way that he had and his confidence. And all I know is that when I walked in there and I saw the garage and I saw how he had it very, like he had like a sheet that covered some of the stuff, you know, just to kind of make it look nice, because it was in a garage and it really wasn't set up for like a school. Like when we moved to 3rd Street, it was just a garage, nothing else. But the other garage had stuff in it that he had draped off. So when he pulled the drape away and I see a gun, not a real gun, but a metal gun and a real knife and a club on the wall, I'm thinking, oh no, like, I mean, when I saw the knife is where I went to, I'm going, oh my God, I'm going to die. You know, I mean, just the paranoia. And next thing you know, he's like, okay, and he grabs my neck and how would you get onto this without punching me? You know, and then the whole thing started from there. But, and he didn't call it Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. He didn't call it Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He said, my family teaches Jiu-Jitsu. So, you know, and this was back when we started. So, you know, next thing you know, I mean, from very first class, it was just like, I gotta do more. I mean, I just feel like I found something.
Well, I was in the book. It's like how you describe your life at that point, with a lot of chaos, you know, with your lifestyle, with the restaurant industry that you were in, and how much you didn't like, you know, a lot of it, and how unhappy you were. And then you find this one thing on a chance that just kind of like not only changed your whole direction of life and, you know, you as a person. It's pretty incredible to sit there and say one thing did that much. How has it been perceived through the jiu-jitsu community, you know, as well as, because it really touches other people outside of jiu-jitsu?
Right. Well, I've had a lot of, well, especially now, because jiu-jitsu has gotten to be taught by world champions and you know, it's become such a big competitive thing, and that was never my focus. I mean, yeah, because back when I really stopped, I mean, when I was in my 40s is when they started really doing a lot of stuff at the academy. And I didn't want to go with the guys in their 20s. Just, I mean, you can see my frame. I mean, right now I'm 140, I'm 5'10", I'm thin. I probably, doing jiu-jitsu, I was probably 150, 155. So, you know, I went with some of the bigger guys, especially back in the early days. And the older I got, I didn't want to, you know, my body was getting trashed. And I wasn't made for training every day. That's why guys go like, how are your ears so nice, Richard? I go, you know, I said, there's no secret. When they start to burn and you can't put your head on a pillow, I would use a warm washcloth and just put warm water on it. And I wouldn't train until the pain went away. I said, just think about it. Your body's telling you something, don't do it. So, I mean, I was taking care of myself. And I lost track.
How the book has been received.
Oh yeah, so thank you. So a lot of guys have said the same thing that I just said, as far as not being a champion, I've had personal message sent to me, and it's been very well received, and I'm very pleased and touched that so many people have written and said those kind of things, that, you know, they're not jiu-jitsu champions and they're looking at jiu-jitsu for something else. So, you know, I'm very pleased. I just don't think enough people know about it yet.
It's funny because, I mean, we've had this school about 20 years here, my school. And I don't think I've only had one time, and it was after I was joking with him. I said, no one ever comes in and says, I want to be a world champion. They come in and they say they want to learn self-defense, or they want to get involved in something, you know, have the camaraderie aspect and learn jiu-jitsu and things like that. And And that's what our school's always been focused on. We do teach the sport element at times, but we also focus on the self-defense. We make sure they know the whole thing and not just one piece. But I think that your story gives people, because you make a great point. I think a lot of times now people think you have to be some great athlete to come do jiu-jitsu. And
Right.
how many times do we get the question, hey, should I get in shape first? Should I run first? Should I go to the gym first? And it's like, no, it's not going to help you all that much when you don't know jiu-jitsu. You're better to come in and learn. And I think that your story gives hope to the people that maybe think they can't do it.
Yeah. Well, it's so true. I mean, when I see the guys, especially, and I try to really limit my sparring with guys that I'm not me personally, but the other guys sparring, I try to, first of all, match them up. And I really discourage sparring before they kind of know what they're doing. Otherwise, most guys will if they're sparring with somebody that they're bigger than, they'll just manhandle them. And I go, what are you learning? I mean, you can push around a guy who you weigh 40 pounds more than? I said, wait, so you want to go with that? Then I'll pick out one of the students. I'll go with the purple belt. And I said, go manhandle him, and jiu-jitsu was always for me, even though, we had these we had like back when I was competing, we're talking about an in-house, in-garage tournament. It's because, remember, we didn't have a school for the first 10 years of doing jiu-jitsu, actually 11 years before, Rorion came to me. So I had already been doing jiu-jitsu for a while, and, would mix it up with, it didn't matter. I didn't think about size. And that's what it was about. It was about defending yourself. No one, like you said, very few people will walk in, but yeah, where can I become a world champion? It's, I want to learn how, and that's the main core thing that Rorion told me. He says, it helps our confidence just to be able to walk out in the street and know that we can defend ourselves. So
I got a quick question for you. Also, it kind of help our viewers out. So I've been training for almost 13 years. So when I started, I went, buddy, he had already started jiu-jitsu. So he brought me to an academy. I went in, I talked to the owner, I signed up, I got a gi. And then there was, 10, 15 guys on the mats, and they paired me up with someone. That's not the same. When I was reading the book there, it's like you did privates, half-hour privates for classes. So if you could kind of go into that with the viewers, that would be awesome.
Well, that was the way Elio Gracie wanted to teach. They wanted like private classes, especially for the first, at least 30, like Rorion would say it, your 36 classes is like you're getting the basics out of the way, your self-defense. He says, after 36 classes, you're 3 times more effective you were when you walked in the door. 36 half-hour classes. And he said, basically, you get your blue belt after that. So I didn't, so after 36 classes, I thought, okay, I'm going to be blue belt. And I was like, what happened? Which didn't help my self-esteem because mine didn't come till the 40th class. But, big deal. But, and then when I got it, I went like, oh my gosh, I don't know anything. It's like all of a sudden I wanted something. And then when I got it, I went like, do I deserve it? And he said, when you walked in the door, that same Richard versus the Richard now wouldn't stand a chance.
Well, that sounds familiar, huh? We say that all the time. I always tell, a running joke, I'm a big Back to the Future fanatic. I love that movie. And I always say to somebody that's down on themselves, I'm like, listen, don't compare yourself to that person or that person or that person. If I put you in a DeLorean with a flux capacitor and I sent you back in time to the day you walked in here, there would be no comparison between the two of you. And, and it's exactly the same thing. It's people don't realize, I think, how much they learn.
Well, yeah. I mean, I tell a story in the book. There was a guy named Chip, and Chip was a little bit younger than me. The guy was probably 6 foot, 200 pounds, really strong guy. So when he first started coming in for classes with Rorion, because I lived there, I would do, when Rorion would say, "Hey, Richard, do you want to help with the class today?" I went, "Yeah." So at the end of the class, maybe 20 classes, the guys had. And so we would do a little bit, and I'd roll with them, and I'd catch him. I'd be in my guard, go to pass the guard, collar choke. And I was like, I felt really good about myself. Here, I caught this big guy, and, I'd go upstairs, feeling like, yeah, you really, not that it got me, but it made me feel good that I was able to deal with this guy. Anyways, after about 6 months, I remember after we rolled, I couldn't catch him, and I was really pissed. I left the garage. I'm walking upstairs to the house. I take my gi down and I slam it on the stairs. And I'm like, I don't know what the hell I said. I suck, and I'm walking up there, and Rorion hears me and he comes walking. Never got emotionally involved. Just said, "What's the problem?" And I says, "Hey, I rolled with the guy and I couldn't catch him." And he says, "Richard," he said, "Chip is younger than you, he's bigger than you, he's stronger than you." And he says, "But what's most important is how many times did he catch you?" I go, "He didn't catch me." And he says, "Can you imagine yourself without jiu-jitsu?" And I went like, "Yeah, okay." So it's just, because you don't realize the improvements that you've made. And that one really hit home for me.
My coach, Pedro Sauer, will always say, there's 3 outcomes. You can win, you can lose, or you can survive.
Right.
That doesn't necessarily mean you won or lost. You didn't lose, you didn't win, but you survived.
Well, how true it is. And I've told students for years, this year I'm going to be 70. So when I'm on the mat with anybody, especially, doing any kind of demonstration, or when guys say, "Hey, I have a problem with this in this position, can you show me?" And I always tell them, I say, "You know what? I'm never, and I mean never, ever thinking about catching the person. My focus is on not being caught." So, and I says, develop your defense. I says, because if I'm going to catch somebody, it's going to be off of something. It's going to be, if you were a stand-up puncher, you'd be a counter puncher. I don't have the aggression, and I don't want to go after somebody, because then I'm mixing my athleticism with theirs. And, as you get to be into your late 60s, you change, you lose that aggression. I'm just thinking survive.
Mm-hmm.
So I can live to, breathe another day.
That's very true. Now, one thing that I thought was very fascinating to me was, as you explained earlier, you were going through a lot in your life, and there was some substance issues and stuff, but Rorion never chastised you about it. He never, at least from the book, it seems like he never spoke ill of you or tried to get you like, "What are you doing?" He just would offer you like fruit or tell you to think on the positive side, and I thought
you would offer it and he'd be like, "Maybe later."
"Oh, that looks like the good stuff," or something like that. It was pretty fascinating to me that he never, it was always positive enforcement. And you talk a lot about how the whole Gracie way was very emotional control. Can you talk about those 2 things?
Okay. Well, do you want the truth, or you want what the story says in the book?
Whatever the truth is, whatever you want to give us.
No, I remember there was one time specifically. First of all, in the house, there was 2 bedrooms and 1 bath. There was a bedroom at the end of the hallway to the right, which had 2 windows, a window to to out the back and then out toward the beach. So I had a southern exposure and a western exposure. The other bedroom had only the western exposure. And Rorion told me, he says, Richard, you take the good bedroom, which was, you know, I was like, wow. And so here I'm in my back nice bedroom, right? And I'm by my desk and I'm sitting there chopping up a little line, and Rorion opens the door and I go, oh man, you want some of this stuff? And he goes, looks like the best kind, you know? And he says, maybe later. And I said, okay, you know, I said, it's here if you want it, you know? But he never like chastised me, just say, you know, like, you really shouldn't do this. He was just saying, you know, think about what you put in your body. That's where the focus went. Just think about what you put in your body. And at the time, you really, when a person is in there, when I was there, I never thought like, you know, that would be a way for me to get out of the position I was doing. Focus on something that you want. And but he never ever just like sat down and said, hey, you know, you got to stop doing this. And you know, so it was really helpful, because you already know a person who's an alcoholic or doing drugs, they know at some level, you know, whether they're consciously aware of it or not, unconsciously, you know, it's like the person who, because, you know, I have a really good eating habits just because of, I studied it after Rorion. So I can't tell you how many times people have said to me when I'm sitting down eating a meal and they're eating a meal with me, they go, I know I shouldn't eat this. And I says, no, man, if you're eating it, you should be eating it. And I says, whatever it is, it might raise your awareness for next time. But at that time right now, you should be doing what you're doing. Because, you know, because they always say, what should I eat? I says, I don't know, find out what works best for you. You know, and that's when we get to the part in the book where, you know, I don't tell a person what they should do, because we all know at some level, we all know what we need to do or should do. So I really got out of out of the habit of telling people that. I just say, well, you know, you could do this, you could do this, you could try something like this. But he was never like sit down and said, hey, don't do this, you know, you're going to hurt yourself. It was just, it was very helpful at the time. I didn't understand it, and I don't know if he knew what he was doing, but it worked. I didn't need any more guilt on me. I had enough of my own.
It's funny. I obviously don't know him. I've only met him a few times, seminars, and he came to our school once, but he's very charismatic. He's very, almost like, I'm a Star Wars geek too, but almost like a Jedi. When a Jedi walks in the room, it's like, hey, you should leave. I should leave. You know, like just the way he talks and the way you just want to like him. It's hard to explain. Would you agree?
Yeah, exactly.
And I try to find myself in your shoes, like living with him and being around that all the time, and private lessons. And, you know, of course we know who he is all these years later, but you didn't at the time. You're putting your faith and trust in him that he is who he says he is. At what point did you realize you had something special? Like, how many classes in, or how many, was it the privates towards the end, or when you went to your own, the garage where you had more group classes, or the actual academy? When did you realize, wow, this is really going to be something?
Well, I don't know if I realized it was really going to be something, but because I started jiu-jitsu in the summer of '79. And then when he came to me in 1980, September, and I was really, you know, probably that was one of the worst times of my life, especially when Rorion went to Brazil in 1979 in November, and he went for 2 months. Now here, I was at a, didn't like my life. And then all of a sudden start looking forward to jujitsu. And then he leaves for 2 months during the holidays. That was the worst binge of my life. And then he comes back and we start training again. And then when I tell him, I said, I need to get away from these roommates, just because I wanted a better influence. And that's when I said, I need to find another roommate. And he said, Richard, I need a roommate. And I was like, I literally went like, are you crazy? I mean, dude, I'm doing drugs and you're this jujitsu guy, I mean, I knew that he had this clean lifestyle, but when we moved in October of 80, the first week, like I said, Elio, Hickson, and Carlos Gracie Jr. came and spent a week with us. And that's when I kind of went like, okay, because up until this time, I've just heard about him. But then, to get a class from Elio and to see how, he was younger than I am now when he taught me, and I was 28. And so I'd heard so much, and I went like, yeah, I think I'm into something here. I had no idea that it would get as big as it did, but I realized what, this is where it's at, and no one knows about it yet. Yeah. And, we would go into different schools and try to share our art, which basically we're there to challenge their art. But
so that's the polite way.
Yeah.
You're there to share some knowledge, sprinkle a little something, and it really wasn't. It was just a challenge.
Well, he knew. He knew. I didn't. I mean, I had heard, but I always kind of expected when we go into a school, like, okay, there's going to be someone out there that's, it's gonna like, I'm gonna have a rude awakening when I see, the sensei come out and, and do something that's going to surprise him. And the first time that I experienced that I really experienced it, it was when we went to an American jiu-jitsu school, which I allude to in the book, because back then, when a guy had a black belt around his waist, I mean, I really thought that they knew something. I didn't realize, and I didn't understand till later, that a lot of it was choreography. I went like, wait a sec, how can these guys walk in the street knowing they're a black belt and realizing it's a false sense of security as far as what they think that they can do, how they can defend themselves. Yeah, if the guy punches you like this, yeah, then you can catch the fist and do a little spin and throw the guy. Other than that, but from where I was at the time, and we walked in that school, and the guy goes to Rorion, he says, okay, why don't, you and your black belts come with me, and the rest of the guys, just go over there in the corner with, the other guys. Like we're peons and we haven't done that choreography. So I'm going with the peons. I mean, I had a blue belt around my waist for 3 months. So, Rorion grabs him by the sleeve and he goes, you come with me. And I was just like, I mean, I was literally petrified. And I said, Rorion, he said black belts. And he whispers in my ear, trust me, you know more than these guys.
Because you still have it at this aura in your mind of what a black belt is in the United States at that time, correct?
Yeah. Exactly. So he says, trust me, you know more. I'm like, oh, Jesus. I mean, how can I know more than a guy? And all I see is black belt. So, when we did that, when I was mounted on top of him and he reached up and he put some pressure and kind of started to pull me down, I felt the pressure and I just sat up higher. And then all his technique went out the door. And when he pushed me out and extended his arm, I caught it. And then Rorion like clapped, like, And I look at him, it's just like, you know, don't do anything. And I'm like, you know, here you taught me to do this, and then you don't want me to do this. But he was saying he wanted to see if there was anything, because from Brazil, they already know. But to the US, who knows? I mean, maybe there is some esoteric art that's, you know, the guy's going to do something, but.
So he's testing the waters. Rorion was testing the waters. Hey, let's go see what they have. Not just let's show them what we know, only show them a little bit of what we know, and we want to see what they know.
Yeah, and exactly. And I'm kind of the guinea pig, because he knew this. I didn't. I mean, you know, you can repeat something over and over again, but until you experience it for yourself, you know, you're just taking someone's word for it. And so to answer your question, when did I really know? I don't know. Because, you know, even though meeting Rickson, you know, and it was great, you know, and then I guess in 1981, when I went to Brazil and I was walking down the streets in Rio with Rickson, and Rickson didn't speak a word of English. So him and I are walking down, you know, I went over to the house, met his wife at the time, and who spoke English, thank God. And so she sends us to the store. So we're going to the store in the evening, and I've heard about Rio in the evening, kind of, you know, you don't want to get held up or robbed. But I was just like, dude, I have a bodyguard with me. Rickson was like, you know, 20, 21 years old at the time. And, you know, everyone knew who Rickson was. And I'm walking down the street going, yeah, go ahead and mess with me, okay? I mean, it was Rickson Gracie, you know, so it was quite amazing. So I saw that after meeting Halls, you know, it just, gosh, what a long-winded answer for a simple question. I don't really know the answer to that when I really knew that it was what it is.
Yeah, I mean, you can't know it. The history hadn't been written yet, so it had to evolve, you know, over time. But I guess, you know, looking back, you know, in reading it through your words on the pages, to be in a room back with a younger generation of Gracie family and have Rickson and all these people on the mat with you, Carlos Gracie Jr., that's amazing. Like, that they would roll with you, train with you, just like anybody else in a normal class nowadays. Like, you know, what were the classes like when you would train with them?
Well, first of all, I mean, I'm assuming you saw the video on my Facebook page with me rolling with Rickson.
Correct. It's an old, very old video. It's kind of choppy.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
That's a Super 8, you know. He made me look really good, because I've had people say like, oh, is that Rickson and Halls rolling together? And I'm like, dude, I mean, just to say that, I was just like, yeah, of course it was Halls. Can't you tell? But anytime you went to spar with those guys, they were really out there to help you learn the move. And that's one of the things when I teach class, my specialty is taking the guy that knows nothing, the insecure guy that knows nothing, to help them along the way. And because Rorion was such an amazing teacher, and he would position himself, that's the one thing about a good teacher, is when you're showing the move, when you show a move, right, and the class does the move, and the new guy working with the other new guy doesn't know how to position his body to make it work good for him. So they have a hard time doing an arm lock, whatever it is. And I'll see them struggling, they'll raise their hand and going, hey, how do you do this? And I'll come over there and I'll stop the class and I'll say, okay, guys, check this out. I go, have you done this move yet? No. I said, now you're going to do it. First time it's going to be perfect. And they look at me and right away, I'm like, oh my God, you're putting me on the spot. And now you're telling me it's going to be perfect. And because I know how to position myself to make him do the move, because I was taught by Rorion for so long that you just learn that. it's, well, I'm assuming you learn. I learned how to do it. And that's what I wanted to give to somebody else. And that's what they did for me. They made me, they didn't like, because I see guys, and I'm sure you've seen it too, you show a move and right away the guy who you're doing the move on wants to say, no, this won't work.
Oh, yeah.
And I'll just go, wait a second. He doesn't know. I said, you want to question the move? You want to test the move? Test it on me. And I'll show you that it does work. I said, but so you're helping the person. And that's what they did. Their focus was on making me better. And, which it shows when they would, because obviously in those videos of me and Rickson, he could have destroyed me at any, when you really roll with Rickson, the first 10 seconds, you're tapped 5 times. Every time you move, you're tapped. So that's exactly the mentality. And I don't have to, the only reason I'm telling you guys this, because I'm sure you know this, obviously, you've been around for a while, and especially being taught by Pedro and down that lineage. But, I don't think it can be said enough, especially to the person that's learning.
No, I agree. It's something we've always tried to hand down is that I think a lot of times even when they're not rolling, they're almost competing against each other, or you have to stop them and say, look, that's not your opponent, that's your partner. You know what I mean? Like you're trying to help each other through this, and you're both learning both sides of the move. You're learning what it's like to apply it, but you're also learning what it's like to receive it.
Right.
Would that make sense?
Absolutely.
So one question I would, maybe you can help me with, I've battled with this for years and I think I'm getting better at it. How do I take the big, strong, athletic guy who's doesn't want to put his strength aside and just learn to trust the concepts of jiu-jitsu and the technique of jiu-jitsu, and every time he gets in any kind of trouble, he just resorts to the Thor hammer and all, craziness breaks out? How do you get that person to calm down? I've tried the tennis ball. Sometimes that works. Sometimes it doesn't. What's your idea to help these type of students relax?
Okay. What's the tennis ball?
Oh, I got it from Henner, actually, where if someone's like kind of aggressive, always grabbing really hard and using too much strength, have them hold 2 tennis balls in their hands when they roll. So now they can't. Yeah.
Or if that doesn't work, Rob just sits there with a bucket of balls and throws them at the person.
Don't do that. So what ideas do you have, though, to help someone calm down?
Let me know when you find out. Okay.
It's hard, right?
It's extremely hard. And, it reminds me of, I had this one guy that I taught years ago. I met him at Krav Maga. The guy was super nice guy, but he's 6'5" and he weighed 260 and he had a body fat of 2%. The guy was just a beast. And he, when he come into my class and he goes, I really don't need martial arts, because he was from London. He goes, I was a bouncer. And he says, when I had a problem in the bar, I just took the guy and threw him against the wall. So just messing around with the guy, I'd come in class, in the front door, right? And I'd have a little pencil and he would come in and I would just kind of go to just like poke him, not hard, not fast, and the guy would block like I was serious. I'm going, dude, seriously, and he would spar the same way. And I'd tell him, and I was just talking to one of my students the other night who is 6'6" and about 215, and he has a very unorthodox way that he rolls, but he's caught guys in the scarf hold. He passes the guard by going forward instead of going back, and he goes forward, grabs the neck, and because he's so long, he blows through guys' guards, and he does a couple things well. And I tell him, I said, look, when you're going with fine, do this on a guy that you're close to the same size. But just to blow through somebody, I said, what are you learning? I said, the only one who's learning right now is the guy you're catching. And I tried to, in slow motion, I let him grab my neck because I want to see how he was passing. And I couldn't stop the pass. And this guy was a blue belt. So I said, okay, now let's start from the beginning. And so when we start from the beginning, he's in my guard. I said, okay, do your thing. And so when he went to grab my neck, I just kept my arms up so he couldn't reach over and grab my neck. So he couldn't pass my guard. So, but the same way that you learn anything else, a lot of times is from repeating and repeating and repeating and repeating. Relax, 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 relax. Some guys, it takes longer. I mean, I had a guy that came to me after 3 years of having classes with me. And all of a sudden he goes, Richard, I get it.
Like,
what do you get? He goes, he says, I know the feeling now. And he says, I'm not completely there, but I get it. 3 years. You know, some guys are really, you know, and I think this tells more about them, their personality, their kind of human being they are, the competition, whatever their deep-seated core issues are, because that's what it comes down to is you got something going on. And all we can do is let you know we're aware of it, and we're going to remind you of it over and over and over again. And
someday they see the light.
That's right. That's our job.
Hopefully I don't butcher it, but it was something in the book, and you probably will remember it. You said to some student, I want you to do the move like you walk across the room. Something to that effect. It was, you know, when you walk across the room, you don't walk across the room all like crazy and fast. You walk with a normal stride and casual about your walk. You're not just, you know, sprinting across the room every time you normally walk. And I thought that was interesting. It's just a normal everyday movement. That's how you should do jiu-jitsu.
Right. And I'll repeat it. I'll say, guys, do the thing as a movement, not as like you're tensed up. Because, you know, when guys would spar, when they would first start to spar, and I started to allude this earlier, is that when they start to spar, they're like, everything is tense. And after like a minute and a half, they're spent. And they go, man, I need to work on my cardio. And I'd say, maybe, maybe not. But I said, if you walk out to your car and you tense up every muscle in your body, you're going to be super tired by the time you get to your car. I said, and that's exactly what you're doing right now. So I said, you know, that's something to be made aware of. And I tell guys, I say, look, when they're sparring, I'll say, keep your mouth closed, because that forces you to nasal breathe. And it also keeps you in a parasympathetic state. And if you can't do that, once you start to open your mouth and start to suck wind, your whole physiology changes. So a lot of times I'll say, if I see you open your mouth, you stop. You stop. And I'll literally stop guys. I'll go, stop there. I said, you're not sparring. And I'll walk around. I go, close your mouth. If I see it open again, stop. And so it's kind of like, you want to spar, shut your mouth. And that's really hard when you're not used to shutting your mouth. Because Rorion he always used to tell me, say, close your mouth. And, you know, I never knew at the time why he was saying, he never explained it. But I'd learned later about breathing, you know, what it does. And all we can do is be the coach. And, you know, and that's, you can only give them a certain amount. So, and
But they
that's
can't
what,
absorb it all at once. There has to be, you know, a little bit over time, and, you know, whatever sticks in the moment. And then, you know, over time, they keep collecting more, hopefully. Now,
yeah.
You went from these private lessons to it was the second garage after that, correct? And then from there, the academy was opened. And then at some point, which you helped them do. And then from there, the UFC became an idea, which you also invested in to help them start off. And you were there at the side of the octagon when Royce went in, correct?
Yeah.
What kind of a transformation? That was a pretty big transformation from where you started to where now they're entering into this pay-per-view event with all these martial artists from all over the world. What did that feel like for you to be standing out there with them and watching that happen?
Well, even though we all had like a reasonable amount of faith in Hoist, we still, like, I saw some of the, you know, the other guys before the fight. I mean, I saw Ken Shamrock. I saw the I think named Taylor Tooley, that big sumo guy. I saw Gerard Godot. You know, I think it was Pat Smith. You know, so I went like, whoa, we didn't see some of these, you know, when they did the challenges at the Academy or the Garage, we saw guys maybe come in, but your average size guy wasn't the size guy that was in the UFC, and there was more than one. So this is when I sat down ringside. I mean, I say in the book, I had a little bag of fruit, and I put it down on the seat. I mean, on the floor. I never touched it. My stomach was in knots, going, "Oh my God, Hoist is going to have to fight. Oh Jesus, please!" I didn't know how it was going to happen. And Rorion's wife at the time, Suzanne, she's like nervous as hell, and I am, and I'm like going, "Oh man, this." And so you say, when did I know when like jiu-jitsu was there? I mean, so here I had questioned it all these years later. But I'm sorry, what was your original question?
No, just like, what was that like to be there?
Oh, it was
pressure, you know, about because we all know what happened, but then you had no crystal ball to look into. He could have gone in there and got knocked out in the first punch thrown, and
right.
And people forget that. Like, he put his ass on the line for jiu-jitsu, and for what we wouldn't be doing what we're doing today had he not gone in there. And
maybe,
you know, I mean, maybe, right?
Yeah, I mean, well, just when I tell you when my stomach was in knots, I mean, that's what it was like, because my stomach was really never in knots when guys would come to the academy and they would do the Gracie Challenge. Because remember, we were doing these things 3 years before, I mean, at the academy, but in his garage, we had all sorts of guys that would come in, and, you know, I'd bring guys over, other people would bring guys over. So this was all happening. We saw the same kind of results over and over again, but all of a sudden now it's on the stage for at least however many people there were in that UFC, in the pay-per-view. So it was, you know, and I guess I was picking up on their, you know, their vibes, their anxiety, the excitement.
Were they nervous as a family, or?
Well, you could see it, Rorion. I mean, I'd always watch Horion's face, and when he would sit there and go, I mean, I'd see his jaws like clench up, you know, because he obviously had a, you know, wider face, but I'd look at him and I'd go like, you know, and you could see the old man. I mean, Elio was sitting there, like, everybody was like, whoa. I mean, just like you would before any kind of a fight. But I guess here, this is what I guess for a long time that they really wanted to show. They wanted to show the world. So here we are, and here's the testing grounds. It's like, please make it happen. And, you know, the rest is history.
What do you think now of the UFC and how far it's come into the spectacle it is? You know, it's all over the world, different countries. I mean, it's this weekend when, you know, it's coming up as a huge pay-per-view event in Abu Dhabi with their, you know, their own island bubble so they can stay COVID free. It's, I mean, for where it was, where even when I first started watching it, I was excited because it'd be like once a month event. And now it's every weekend. They have an event somewhere with a card of, instead of, you know, 8 fighters, then it goes to 10 fights. And now, you know, the undercard has 13 fights alone.
Right. Well, I have 2 thoughts about that. One, I wish I owned just a wee fraction of that. But 2, I won't pay for a pay-per-view. There's, you know, I don't care who the hell's fighting. I mean, if my boss is, you know, doing something and he has it at his school, you know, which is, you know, couple miles away, I'll go watch. But a lot of times I tune out when I see guys that are just punching each other. I have zero interest in that. I want to watch technique. I want to see guys practice doing something. Because it's become who's better trained for this thing. I mean, it totally became this whole sport. And that's why when they took the rules away, that's when Rorion didn't want to have any part of it. And you can have certain rules, but when they made time limits, it's like they didn't want to be involved anymore. And I realized that, I mean, because I spent time around the boys, but Henner and Hiran, and one of the things that they say is, especially with law enforcement, or any kind of a fight, is kind of like the 90-second rule. You have to control somebody and defend yourself for 90 seconds before that person kind of calms down when they're spent. And because of how they're told, in other words, you have 5 minutes to do it in, and it makes me flash back to the fight when I saw Crone fight. I think it was one of his last fights, and he was chasing, and he got kicked, and he showed how tough he was, but he kept chasing the guy, and I'm like screaming, stop chasing the guy, let him come to you. I mean, this is what jiu-jitsu was. But I'm sure, and to take nothing away from Crone, because I mean, look, his dad's Hickson, he's super tough, but I don't think that that's for him. If he wanted to fight with his rules, or with the kind of rules that it should be, where you don't have a time limit and there's, you wait for your spot.
Draw them in.
That's right.
Yeah.
But look who he trains with. The Diaz brothers. Those guys are known to take as much punishment as, so to answer your question, I'm really not a big UFC fan. If Dana wants to throw me some money because I helped start it, I'd be glad to take a few bucks. But
it's funny because a lot of people, when they first come to the academy, to my academy, to one of our academies to sign up, people will automatically just assume that I'm a UFC fan. And I saw the first UFC. That's what got me interested in learning jiu-jitsu. But I wanted to learn it for a different reason. I didn't want to learn it to become an MMA fighter. I wanted to learn it to help me better in my job as I became a police officer, because I like the scalability of jiu-jitsu. I like the fact that, you know what? Muay Thai is a very good art. Boxing is a very good art. If you want to hurt somebody, like you can, but you can't turn the volume down on a punch or a kick or a knee or an elbow. You have to full force hit the person. Your goal is to drop them. What I like about jiu-jitsu is I can hold somebody at a 1 and just positionally control their skeleton without hurting them, all the way to a 10. If I really had to do some damage because my life's on the line, I have that adjustability. And that's what I have always been fascinated with jiu-jitsu. I think it has the most answers to the most questions.
Absolutely. And I remember I just saw the quote recently by Damian Maya. That's what he said. He said, it's the only art where you can fight somebody and not hurt them. And Rorion said that a long time ago. I remember he said, we have the opportunity, you can fight somebody and you don't have to hurt them. And he says, like you had just said, what other art can do that? When you punch, you can't just like, I'm only going to hit you 30%. It's like, that's what you're trained to do. And that's, in classes, and I'm sure you've done this, when guys, like, they'll certain grabs and or a headlock, a regular side headlock, and the guy, well, go for the eye gouge or a fish hook. And I said, yeah, except if the guy is tough and sees the arm coming and they grab the hand, and now you can't fish hook, now get out of the headlock. And all they have left to do is the power that they have, and I'll just say, what if it's your uncle and you're at a barbecue and the guy has a few too many? Well, you're going to knock him out? You shouldn't have grabbed me like that, it's so, and no one needs to be taught and you guys have done a different arts, so maybe you know something that I don't. But no one needs to be taught techniques for eye gouging. I mean, we don't have to, okay, no, look, when you eye gouge, the special technique is when you bend and you use these two fingers and you go in at this angle. I mean, our natural inclination, if we're gonna eye gouge, is we take our fingers and eye gouge. And I says, if that's the way you're training, that's what you're going to do in a situation. And I will tell you, because remember, at least I was at a Krav Maga school before COVID. I don't know if I'll be there after COVID, but I'll tell them, I'll just say, if you turn up, if you get attacked and you escalate and you start to bite or eye gouge, there's no going back. It's not like you can bite the guy and all of a sudden he gets escalated and you go, and he starts getting more, well, oh, wait a second, I was just kidding. I didn't really mean to bite you. I didn't mean to eye gouge, you know? So if you turn it up, you better be prepared to go the distance. So, you know, scale it. Only you will know. Only you will know where you need to go in this situation. I can't tell you. I can just tell you where I start from. And, you know.
That's very true. It's funny because I've seen, I don't even know how many fights I've seen in the real world as a police officer showing up to break them up or whatever. I've lost track of how many I've seen. And it is extremely rare actually that people bite or eye gouge. I don't think they think of it in the moment. It's so chaotic and people are swinging and grabbing, and it's not as common as people, I think, assume it is, that people get gouged their eyes out or scratched really bad or bitten. I've seen people that have gotten bitten a couple times, but overall, it's not a common thing that occurs. It's usually punches being thrown, grabbing hair is popular, you know, grabbing at clothes, pinning people down, you know, it's just a tangled mess usually. But I don't think it's as common as people think.
Well, that's, you know, I almost said I'm happy to hear that, but just, I am happy to hear that when people are fighting, because you're a police officer and you know when, you know, what is happening in most cases, not to say that it can't happen.
Yeah, there's anomalies, but.
Right, of course. You know, it's learn the technique, train the technique, and, you know, and then the main thing is hopefully you don't have a big ego and you don't want to test your technique. Because I've had confrontations and I'm proud to say I've walked away from all of them, and I've been called, you know, I remember one of my good friends read the book and she called me up and she goes, "So you're a punk ass bitch." And I was like, I said, "Okay, so you read that part," you know, and you know, it's just to walk away. And I was walking in my neighborhood probably a month ago. And some guy as I'm walking, it was in the evening, it was dark. I hear some yelling. I'm talking on my phone and I hear yelling coming up on me. And I'm like, I ignore it because maybe they're yelling at someone else. And then it gets closer and closer. And finally, when I turned around, the guy was maybe 30 feet from me walking in my direction. And I was like, oh, no, you know. First of all, the last thing I want to do now is get into a fight. But when I saw the size of the guy, I went like, I do not want to fight this guy. And I walked with a little Perrier glass bottle. It's about 11 ounces, so it's small enough. And I pulled it from my back pocket. And I had it in my left hand where he couldn't see it. And when I turned around, I just kind of had it out there because if I'm getting attacked, you know, I'm not going to take the guy down until I have to. The guy attacks me, I'm going to try to just put him out. And finally, when I did turn around, I stopped there for a second and I told my buddy, I said, "Hold on a second." And he said, "Where are you? What location?" I told him the streets that I was at in case anything happens. And then the guy yells at me. He says, "What's your iPhone broken?" And I just said, "No, I can't afford an iPhone." And all of a sudden, the guy just kind of like, I don't know what he expected. And he just kind of mumbled something and walked away. You know, and my point is, do your best I says, because I'm teaching you to fight so you don't have to.
Mhm.
Basically, that's it. I'm teaching you to fight, so get your ego out of it, because you don't know what you're going to get when you get into a fight.
And I think that's one thing jiu-jitsu does teach you, is that you go against enough people in class and you learn not to assume anything. You learn to, hey, you never know what someone's capable of. They might look small or fragile, or they might look big and strong. And until you really lock horns with them and see what they're made of, you don't really know what they're capable of. And now how many other people are walking around out there that you have no idea what their capabilities are? The last thing you want to do is get in there and try to prove yourself. So, and then learn the hard way that, this is the wrong nest that I've crawled into. And
Yeah.
that's a hard lesson to learn. And I think that, a friend of mine always says, the de-escalation of, like you're talking about, comes from the confidence of training. It comes from knowing what you're capable of doing and knowing what the results can be either way. That probably teaches you to talk it down. Would you agree?
Yeah, and and I guess as you get a little older, I start thinking about self-preservation too. It's like I keep thinking, okay, what I could do to them, and then, like I said, and one of the things Rorion told me early on, he says, don't underestimate anyone you're going with. I mean, even when you're showing them a move, because you don't know if they're gonna, oh God, I want to be politically correct, but spaz out. Like all of a sudden just got, and accidentally pop you in the face. That's happened many times. And I'll tell guys the same thing. I go, hey, you always be calm, have a nice smile on your face, but be ready. So, you don't know what you're going to get. And jiu-jitsu is the one thing that teaches you, because you get the opportunity to really test it on the mat when you're going with somebody, especially when you learn to spar. You get guys that are going to be crazy strong and fast, and it gives us such opportunities.
I would definitely agree with that. And before we go, do you have any good, I don't know how well you knew him in the past, you have any good Pedro Sauer stories for us?
First of all, Pedro is one of the nicest. I mean, I'm sure, people I'm sick and tired of people talking about how nice Pedro. No, I mean, Pedro's a super nice guy. And, but I remember when, I think it was after the UFC had started. Oh gosh, who was the Russian Sambo guy? Oleg Taktarov. I'm teaching a class. Pedro is at the academy. Obviously, Rorion was at the academy. Oleg Taktarov walks in the door, and he wants, because they wanted to interview him, and so Rorion says that, I'm teaching class. Pedro's in the class, and he goes, Pedro, why don't you come to the back room with me and Oleg? Because he wanted to see what Oleg, how he was. And I was just like, oh, good. Can I come into Rorion? Richard, you got to teach the class. I'm like, here. So Pedro and Rorion and Oleg go back to the back room. And like 15 minutes later, he comes back in. Pedro walks in, doesn't look like he's really done too much. And I says, was there, and he says, he's okay. But, there's nothing technically that he did that would surprise me. So it was just kind of like that thing, because most people in the UFC don't even know who Oleg Taktarov is.
Oh yeah, I know he is. That's
right,
when Henzo.
I mean, right, but some of the newer guys, they don't know who Oleg Taktarov was. I mean, he was that guy that that when he first came on, he was tough, but then he was also the guy that Renzo Gracie upkicked and knocked him out. So, but he was earlier on one of the guys that I think that people had questions about, because he had Sambo.
So there was some uncertainty there.
Yes. But Pedro, kind of, once when Pedro came out, and I was just like, yeah, Pedro, it's like, no threat. So
He always told me that when the bodybuilding match he had, the guy against the bodybuilder, I'm sure you've seen it.
Lance, yeah.
Yeah. He said, I never saw the guy until he walked in the room. I didn't even know what he looked like. Knew nothing about him until he walked in the room. That's the first moment he ever saw him.
Holy smokes.
He just remembered this with answering the phone. It was a radio station, I guess, that had set it up. And when they called him, they said that they wanted to do this fight. He said, "Oh, fight? Yeah, fight." Because he didn't really know he didn't talk much English at the time, or very broken English. So he's like, "Yeah, I'll fight." So then when the guy showed up, he saw him. It was the very first time he'd ever seen him.
And he said he was greased up, tons of Vaseline all over him, because they had an idea of what he could do. So they wanted every little bit of advantage they could have. That guy was a monster too. He was Mr. Utah.
Mr. Utah, yeah.
Oh yeah.
Well, it was a pleasure speaking with you. And I don't know if you ever go on the road or you come out around the East Coast at all, but or if I'm ever out that way, I'd love to come down and see wherever you're teaching and take a class with you at some point. But if you're ever out this way, we'd love to have you out there.
Where are you exactly?
Connecticut.
Connecticut.
Manchester, Connecticut.
Well, one of the things that I want to do, and I'm sure you know who the Miglerese brothers are.
Oh yeah, Phil. Yep.
Yeah.
Pardo.
Phil, by the way, Phil asked me right as the book started coming out, he asked me if I had a website. And I said no. And 2 days later, he called me up. He goes, "Richard, you have a website now."
Oh, wow.
And I was like, he created the freaking website for me, and he did a really great job. And so, I mean, I've had guys, so Phil has said, look, come to, Philadelphia in the springtime or whenever was, just to do a seminar. So as soon as COVID starts to relax, and I want to do a little bit of traveling. First of all, I never really wanted my name out there as much, but what I want as much, if not more, is I want people to know this history that's only behind us for such a short time now. I want them to, a lot of people don't know where jiu-jitsu started coming from, as big as it is. And I'd really want that, shared. And you guys, I'm sure because you're being taught your lineage, you guys know that, and I'm assuming your students know it too.
Correct.
But there's so many who don't, and I'd like to see that changed.
Well, I think especially right now, because lately on a lot of the forums and a lot of different social media platforms, is the American Jiu-Jitsu is starting to pop up, and this little how it went from sport versus self-defense. Now it's American Jiu-Jitsu versus Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, because you have certain players, especially in the sport realm, who are American. So they're trying to, it almost seems like there's
Separated.
This rift where they're separating the Americans from Brazilian, and it's not that anymore. So there wants to be a stamp put on American Jiu-Jitsu as well as the stamp that was Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. It's interesting right now. So I think with your perspective and your story, I think it's a great time for you to be able to come out and talk and, educate a lot of these young guys that are coming, women and guys that are coming into, the martial art, and kind of show this is where the roots are. This is where the roots came from. So
I think it would be embarrassing at some point to be a black belt, and someone says to you at a cookout, like you mentioned, your uncle at a cookout, and, "Oh, where you martial arts? Oh, where? Oh, with this guy, Rob. Oh, who'd he learn from? I don't know." And I think that you should know, your lineage. You should know, oh, my instructor's so-and-so, and he learned from so-and-so, and down the line of the lineage and where it came from and the history behind it. I mean, it's not just the physical side. There's the philosophy side. There's the history. I don't know. I think that's important.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But by the way,
oh, wow. And for those of you that can't see that are listening, we got a old school picture right in front. It's Rorion
and Hickson.
It's hard to make out the other one, but it looks like Hickson. That's some nice 80s attire right there.
This was taken October of '80 when And that was, the background is our living room. But I was looking through some pictures and I found this. I'll probably post it on Facebook. But your viewers saw it first.
That's correct. That's correct. So we want to thank you, Richard Bressler, and of course with Scott Burr. Scott helped you as well. Put the book up here for you guys. Worth defending.
Let me say, Scott didn't just help me. Scott made this project happen. He did, like people say, oh man, you've written such a nice book. That's Scott. Scott did an amazing job to get the story across.
And I have to say, Scott is the reason we're talking, because Scott had saw my post I did on Amazon for, well, actually, first I emailed you just to say Facebook Messenger, I'd like the book. And then you asked me to do the review, which I was doing anyways. And Scott saw that and contacted me, and that's how we set up this whole podcast.
Right.
So it was great, great to have that connection.
So just so our viewers and listeners know, they can get the book on Amazon. Is there anywhere else they can get the book?
I would either go to richardbressler.com, Bressler with 1 S, and that's a link where it says buy it, takes you to Amazon. It's that way, if they just go to richardbressler.com, they'll find the book. But there's one guy that's selling the book on eBay for a couple dollars more.
Oh, jeez.
You know, but you know, hey, the guy, no, if he's signing it, then you know, I was thinking about
several of our students in the last week have already. I see them walking around them in the stool. So I actually have considered. We've just talked about this. I'll let you, you'll be the first to know it. We've considered maybe adding this as, if you know, as you get up towards your black belt, you got to read it.
Great. I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, I think it'd be kind of cool. Well, thank you, sir. And I hope this whole COVID thing, I know you guys are having it pretty rough out there in California. So I hope it starts to resolve over the next few months, and sooner the better.
Yeah, me too.
Thank you for taking the time to speak to us.
Thank you for taking the time to speak to me and finding out more about this story. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
All right. Have a good one. Thank you very much.
You too.